Welcome to 'Cause We're Nerds, the podcast that covers trends and new releases in comics, movies, video games, board games, and much more. I'm your host, Caleb, and with me is my co-host and cousin, Zach.
What's up, chicken nuggets?
This week, we take a look back at all the games that feature our favorite wall crawler. Does Spider-Man 2 live up to the hype? What about Web of Shadows? And will all of these games be trumped by the new Spider-Man PS4 game? Find out on this week's episode of 'Cause We're Nerds. Alright guys, welcome back. Today we are going to be talking about how Digimon is better than Pokemon.
Yeah, right. Actually, so after our episode, Pokemon everything started happening after that. I saw a tweet immediately after about how Japan has this huge subway car that's all decked out in a Pokemon style.
Oh, really?
You never see that for Digimon, only in Pokemon. And then you know how we were talking about how kids talk about Pokemon but would never talk about Digimon. This Sunday I was teaching a class and there was a group of 8 kindergarten boys and they all started talking about Pokemon and comparing how many cards they had. So one was like, I have 200. The other was like, well, I have 300 cards. Then they started talking about Ash. And one of the kids was like, well, do you know Ash and Misty? Do you know Ash? And started stating off all his partners throughout all the episodes. And I'm like, man, this just proves I'm right.
It doesn't prove It doesn't prove that I'm wrong.
The comments on our Facebook page proves that I am the victor. All right, but what I wanted to mention, so do you remember our Kickstarter horror stories episode?
No, I have no recollection of anything we ever do.
Perfect. Well, I was traveling overseas. I got an email from none other than Dark Souls and Steamforged.
Oh,
yeah,
really?
That's right. Yeah, I'll read you one of the sentences in their massive 5-page email, and this basically sums it up. Due to unforeseen delays, fulfillment did not start to the original timeline.
Yep.
Yep. So what I now paid for that I thought was coming in July should have arrived in July. Probably won't arrive until maybe October, November.
I'm gonna go ahead and
that's
say
what I paid for. The expansions that I don't think I'll get them ever. But the expansions that I should have gotten, all of this stuff I should have gotten 2 years ago. Now is projected maybe a spring is probably what they're projecting, which means Christmas of next year. Maybe. We'll see. I don't think I'll ever get them. We'll see.
I think you'll get that base game February or March. I'm calling it. I'm sorry.
I have the base game. I'm just waiting for my add-on boss that I purchased, I paid money for, and all the add-on extras, which are the expansions to the game that they should have released, but they haven't released. And so, yeah.
Wow. That sucks.
Yeah, it's bad. It's bad.
I actually backed a couple things on Kickstarter recently. One of them got canceled, which, I guess that's okay. And I'm thinking about kickstarting. They've got a Power Rangers game on there right now that looks really sweet. I'm thinking about going in on it.
Was it the Trogdor one that was canceled?
No, the Trogdor one was successful. It was another one called, it was part of the Seventh Seas franchise, which has a bunch of games, but it was kind of like the Japanese game we played, the war.
Rising Sun?
Rising Sun, yeah. It was kind of like a Rising Sun game. But basically they said, apparently that was the second time they put it on Kickstarter. The first time they took it down because they were getting a lot of feedback and they realized the game needed more work. And basically the same thing happened again. They were like, we could probably hit our funding because they were really close, but we still think it needs more work. So we'll come back eventually. But for right now, we're just going to cancel it so nobody's disappointed.
Good for them.
Yeah, I think that's a really good way to handle it. I was a little sad that it was canceled, but if it's bad, then I don't want it. So
exactly.
Yeah. But anyway, we're not talking about Digimon in this episode or Kickstarter, although it is a wonderful thing. We are talking about Spider-Man video games, because next week, from when this episode comes out, the new Spider-Man PS4 game will be coming out. And Zach, it will definitely be in my possession.
I was just going to say, have you received your Spider-Man exclusive PS4 machine?
No, because that actually comes with the game, so that doesn't release until the same day.
So will you get them at the same time?
No. So
you'll have the game and no PS4?
Yeah.
The injustice.
Yeah. So
the irony.
So pretty much, I am going to get, I'm trying to think, because I ordered them from two different places because the collector's edition of the game was sold out. So I had to like just find it anywhere. And then I got the PlayStation from a different place because they had that one. So I think the way it's going to work is I think I'm going to get my PlayStation on the day it releases, which comes with the game. But it, now I'm confused. So I'm getting two copies of the game. Not on purpose. I got the collector's edition, but there was no option to get the PlayStation without the game. So
sure.
I'm getting the system, which comes with the game. I am going to go ahead and open that game and play it. And then I'm going to actually sell that to my brother, Jacob, at a discounted rate. Because my collector's edition won't be in until the following week.
Okay, no, that makes a lot of sense. Although, you will have to do so many updates, because you're going to get the PS4, then you're going to have to update it, then you're going to have to get the game, and then you have to install. I know there's a day one update.
Yeah.
Install update for Spider-Man already, which, I mean, that's typical. Games typically have that. So you have to update that. And eventually you'll be able to play. I'm
going to do the system link transfer, which Jacob's actually done before. He said it only takes like an hour or two, and his hard drive was full. So it's actually not that bad. But I'm pretty excited. Are you going to get it?
No, I don't have a PS4. If I did...
Oh, that's right. You're a lame Xbox dude.
Maybe, but I actually haven't been playing a ton of video games lately, but there are some on the horizon I will for sure get, such as the new Doom or Cyberpunk.
Wait. Oh, yeah, there is a new Doom. I completely forgot about that. I don't stay in the loop with Doom. Never been my thing. Anyway, alright, so we are looking at a whole list of Spider-Man video games here, and we're going to focus on console games because there's a lot. If we tried to include all the handheld games and the arcade games or any games that Spider-Man has appeared in, it would be probably well over 60 games. Just the console games is 24. And then if you add the handhelds and the arcades, that's another like 10 on top of that. At least.
Are you including like the Capcom versus
Marvel
or anything like that?
No, we can talk about those if you want.
Or Ultimate Alliance, so none of those. Just sole Spider-Man games.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to talk about those, we definitely can. But the issue is, like I said, there's just way too many of those. So I was only picking ones that like headline Spider-Man.
Sure, that makes sense.
So I am a big Spider-Man fan, as I have said before, and so I have played a lot of these. Actually, not as many as I thought, because there are a lot of older ones, like 95 and older, but that accounts for like half of them. So from 2000 onward, I've actually played all of them except for one, and then I've played like maybe 5 of the pre-95 ones.
Sure. It's a good spread.
How many have you played?
2.
Wonderful.
3, actually, if you count the Spider-Man game that you had. Not Spider-Man 2, but I think it was Spider-Man 1 that you had on the PlayStation 2.
I didn't have a PlayStation 2.
That you had on the PlayStation?
I didn't have a PlayStation.
All right. The one that you have, was it on the GameCube?
It had to have been.
It was Spider-Man 1. Remember, it was where you could unlock the Green Goblin and you could play as him on his glider.
Yeah, that's the first movie one.
Okay, the first movie then. That must have been on the GameCube. So I played that, Spider-Man 2, and then I have also played Web of Shadows.
Oh, okay, good.
I had Web of Shadows. So.
Those are some good ones to have played. So If we go way back, the first console Spider-Man video game was just called Spider-Man. It came out in 1982. It was on the Atari. This thing looks really bad. It kind of reminds me of like Wreck-It Ralph, like the game from the movie.
So it's like a side-scrolling classic like 80s game.
Yeah, like you're on a building, and I think you can just like move around the building like you're crawling on it.
Retro, I like it.
Yeah, I mean I haven't played it, so I can't say, but it doesn't look great.
Of course.
And then they came out with 11 more games between 84 and 96. All of which...
Why so many games?
Because it was the heyday of games, right? So this is like one thing that Marvel hasn't done a great job of. And this was actually something that shocked me looking at this list. Games came out really regularly. So, like, for example, we have one in 82, 84, so that's a 2-year gap. Then there is actually a fairly large gap because the next one didn't come out till 89. But after that, we got 90, 90, 92, 92, 94, 95, 95, 95, 96. And then there's another 4-year gap to 2000. So these used to come out like really regularly, especially starting in 2000. There were some every year for a couple years, and then only like 2-year gaps. So the gap that we're in right now, it's been 4 years since the last Spider-Man game, which is the longest it's been, except for 84 to 89. But the last Spider-Man game was not good. So if you count good Spider-Man games, it's been quite a while.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, a lot of those old ones are like team-ups. So, for example, the one in 89 was Spider-Man and Captain America in Doctor Doom's Revenge. And then they had Spider-Man and the X-Men in Arcade's Revenge.
Wait. Go back to the Doctor Doom's Revenge. That sounds epic.
Yeah, so that was released in 89. I haven't played that one. I looked up screenshots of all these because I can't remember which ones I hadn't played. Because they are all, except for that first one, pretty much the same thing. They're like a side-scrolling beat-em-up. So they're kind of indistinguishable for the most part.
Looks like there's Captain America in there too. That's sweet.
Yeah. Yeah, and then like the X-Men one had all the X-Men in it from the time. It had like Wolverine, Storm, Cyclops.
So it's like your classic, like kind of like a Castlevania kind of side scroll. I mean, it's Mario. It's like all of that.
Yeah, well, some of them are a bit more Castlevania-y, and some are more like Double Dragon, where you're kind of on the street beating people up. But they're all very, very similar. There wasn't a whole lot of variety, but I mean, I guess most games were kind of like that back in the day. That one with the X-Men, I actually didn't play that on a console, but they later brought it to the handheld, and it is, I think, the first video game I ever owned.
Really?
Yeah, I bought it at a used game store for the Game Boy, and it was super hard. You played it, but I don't know if you remember, because there was like this part where you'd get stuck in a pit, and you had to jump your way out by like jumping left and then quickly turning right.
Oh, I think that was terrible. Yeah.
I like that game. I think it's hard.
No. That part was like terrible. It was like hard. No, I remember that game. That was a fun game.
Yeah.
I mean, looking back at it, if I played it now, it'd probably just be like, like decent.
Yeah. If I would have had time, I would have gone back and played all of these. But I mean, when there's 32 or 24, however many, it just would have taken too much time. So I didn't get a chance. Looking through the rest of these, there are some other ones that have some really cool titles, like Spider-Man Return of the Sinister Six, which is a title from the comic books, Spider-Man and Venom Maximum Carnage, which I have played. That one's not bad. That's probably one of the better ones.
Okay. So are all of these kind of the same? I mean, when we're clumping these, and they're all in the same vein of just that side-scrolling adventure, grainy graphics. Okay.
Yep, exactly. And that's why they run together. There was one that was a little bit different. It was a Japan exclusive, strangely enough, called The Amazing Spider-Man Lethal Foes. I actually played that for the first time in this past year. It is incredibly hard. Like, so super hard. Like, you're on the rooftops and you get to the end with a boss. I think it's Beetle is the first boss. And he just attacks you constantly. Like, there's not really anything you can do.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And then like we've got Spider-Man Venom Separation Anxiety, which sounds pretty sweet. I have played that one as well. You can play as Venom in that one, which makes that kind of cool. And then a couple others, and most of these were released on the Super NES and the NES and the Genesis for the most part.
Sure.
And the other thing that really stands out about these are, for the most part, they're all different studios. The only ones that are the same are the Separation Anxiety, Maximum Carnage, and X-Men game were all developed by Software Creations. All the others were just one-off games.
So what comes after that then?
All right. After that, we start actually getting some variety in the games. And this is where I think most people will agree Spider-Man games started to get good. Like, they started to actually feel like Spider-Man games. And the first one of those was 2000. There was a game released called just Spider-Man, right? And this was the one that was released on PlayStation and N64. This is not the movie. This is the one that's based on the comics. It also had a sequel the next year called Enter Electro. And these are actually really good. I have the first one for the 64. And what surprised me about it is how similar it is to both the movie video game and Spider-Man 2, the movie video game. Because a lot of the kind of groundwork for the moves and the different attacks you can do and the controls all started there, which was really interesting because I didn't realize that. That was developed by like a million different companies. Pretty much every console had its own development group. So I don't really know who did it, but it's really awesome. The second one is really cool. I don't know much about it, except that probably the coolest thing ever happened, which is the final boss. Spoiler if you care about this game that's 12, 15 years old. Carnage merges with Doc Ock, and that's the final boss.
Oh, that's sweet.
Yeah, and he's like chasing you through this tunnel or something, and you have to outrun him. That's like my most vivid image of that game. My friend had it, and I was always super jealous because he had the PlayStation, and I didn't have anything at the time. But in 2002, that's when we got the first game you played, which is that movie video game.
That's right, and that's one that you had on the GameCube, if I'm correct.
Yep.
That was a pretty fun game.
Yeah,
for its time, I should say. For its time.
Right. I remember after the sequel came out, not really liking it that much at first, and then going back to it and realizing, well, wait a minute. No, this game was actually really good. It's not as big as Spider-Man 2, and it doesn't actually really follow the story of the movie at all.
No.
Now that I think about it. The final levels do, but aside from that, it doesn't. But it was really good.
No, the beginning does, because aren't you trying to track down...
oh, you're right.
The guy
the
that killed
killer.
Uncle Ben. Yeah.
Yeah, you are right.
confront him in the warehouse, kind of like the movie.
Yep. But after that, it kind of goes off in its own direction. I'm trying to think of the villains you fight in that one. It depended on the console you were on, too, because I know like the Xbox version got Kraven, but he was not in the GameCube version. But
interesting.
Yeah, like they swapped. There was an extra villain that wasn't in the Xbox version that was in my version. Definitely the Green Goblin was in there, obviously, the villain of the movie.
Which, honestly, was one of the coolest unlocks, like, after you beat the game, is, alright, you beat up robbers, but as the Green Goblin, you can throw his pumpkin bombs and just blow people up, and that was like, this is awesome.
And you could fire the guns.
Yep.
And you could run into people with the spikes.
Yep.
Yeah, it was really cool. You also got to fight Scorpion, which was cool. I know Shocker was in there. Vulture was in there, which is kind of a weird level because you're like in a tower and you can't really swing around, but it's a burning tower on the inside. You have to navigate your way throughout, which is actually pretty cool. I feel like I'm probably missing someone, but that game was really good. And I probably should have mentioned that Spider-Man game in 2000, that was the first 3D Spider-Man game, right? Same thing with the sequel, Enter Electro. Those games, you were on building tops and inside of buildings. Anything below that was like a mass of fog.
Yeah.
And then with a movie game, you were inside buildings most of the time, but when you were outside, you could see the ground, but you couldn't go down there. Like if you dropped,
and you died.
Yeah, you would die basically. And then the game changer came. That was Spider-Man 2.
And this was hailed as a success. I remember like looking back, I think a couple years ago, I just wanted to see like, how is it still received? And for the most part, it's still well received. It's seen as one of the best Spider-Man games still to date, even though it's so old. And I think that's because it was a game changer, because it was, as far as I can tell, the first open world Spider-Man game.
Oh yeah, it definitely was. And I remember like the marketing for it was like, go anywhere, do anything, because you can actually go down to the street level now and do stuff. It was
my balloon! My balloon! Get it!
There's a lot of side missions where you have to go catch some kid's balloon that he's let go of.
Get my kid's balloon!
or one of like the best side things was delivering pizzas. Do you remember that?
Dun 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 and it would just... Side note, I was like at some Italian restaurant. It wasn't in Europe. It was here in America. Classic. And that song came on, and I lost it. I lost it. I'm like, yes! This makes me think of Spider-Man 2. And Michaela was like, what are you talking about? And I'm like, oh, it was amazing.
Yeah, it was so funny because like that was a whole part of the game. It was side missions, but like I think you had to do those to unlock like faster swing speeds and stuff.
It was. Remember, you had to you got money or experience points, one or the other, and then you had to use it to buy moves. Or buy upgrades for yourself, which actually is another thing on top of that. So not only was this game open world, not only did it have a main mission and side mission, you could choose which one you pursued because you were in New York, right? So you didn't have to go all the way to Ellis Island if you didn't want to fight Mysterio. You could stay where you were and do side missions. But then on top of that, you could chain moves. So there was stuff like, I mean, you could just be swinging, freestyle swinging, and stick to a wall and then jump off and hit a light post and like swing on that and then jump off there and do a slingshot like of yourself. Like you could combo a ton of these different moves, so it really felt like you were Spider-Man.
And like the things you could unlock were different combat abilities, different moves you could do, as well as like different things you can do with your webs. Like one of my favorite things to unlock was where you could web them up and hang them from the light posts.
Yes, I love that. And I mean, it had an element where you could do some sneak attacks as well. So you didn't always have to just swing in. But you could, because there were also abilities where you could just swing in and take out a few people as well. You know, video game wise, I would compare this Spider-Man 2 to like the Jedi Outcast game, if you're like a Star Wars fan.
Yeah.
Jedi Outcast is seen as one of the first video games that made it feel like you were an actual Jedi in control of a lightsaber. Like what you did with lightsaber, what you did with Force powers mattered, and it felt like that. That's kind of how this Spider-Man game felt playing as Spider-Man.
And it also offered you a lot of different options. Like you said, you could go around and do different things, but even like the swinging, they had 2 different modes for swinging, where one of them you control it with just the right, not bumper, the right trigger button. And the other one you could actually use both the left and the right. And you could, I think it was called manual mode. And you could do some really interesting things, but it was a lot harder to control. Not a whole lot of people would do that, but it was really cool. This was also the first one that the webs actually attached to the buildings when you swung. Which
yes. Yeah. And so if you were out of reach of a building, you couldn't swing.
Yeah, or like if you were by a tree, it would attach to a tree.
Yeah.
Or something. Yeah. But in all the previous ones, it pretty much shot straight up into space. And you were swinging from nothing, which, I mean, I guess was cool for the time.
And there were a lot of villains in this. I mean, they had like, and some heroes too, but they had like Black Cat, Mysterio. What were some of the others that were in here?
Oh, man.
Rhino?
I feel like Rhino was in it. I think he was. I think he was a really super minor villain. They also had, obviously, Doc Ock was in it.
Yeah.
Oh, man, it's been so long since I've played this. I'm having a hard time remembering.
I mean, and what I liked about this, because you could go everywhere, I already mentioned, like, you fight Mysterio on Ellis Island, but you also ride the train, and you're on top of it, like in the movie, fighting Dr. Octopus. But you also find yourself, on top of these iconic buildings, swinging around with Black Cat. And I remember you can, I think, climb up the Empire State Building if I'm correct, and then jump off of it.
Yep.
So you can go like all the way to the tippy top and then look around
and jump off of it. And that kind of started a trend where it's like, all right, go to the highest point in the city in a Spider-Man game and jump off of it after you looked around. Like, that was one of the coolest things. And it had a bunch of collectibles you could go find. It still didn't follow the story, to a T, but it followed it a lot better than the first game did.
True.
So it for all intents and purposes, it was the ultimate game. I mean, it even had like little events that would start and you go to it in the city. For example, like there could be a bank robbery and you would swing over to that point and you could stop the bank robbery, or a carjacking and you would swing onto the car and you'd have to like punch holes in the car in order to get the car to stop. And then you'd have to beat up the guys once they got out of the car.
As the cars were going, right? So, like, it was great because the cars would move, and as the cars were moving, you would have to catch up with them. Now, obviously, like, Caleb and I are romanticizing this game. Like, there's a lot to love about it, but it was still a pretty old game. So, like, those car chases, I'm pretty sure they were on a set track and would basically just keep going around the block. So
yeah.
It didn't do a lot, right? And the graphics don't hold up. They're great for its time. They're great for open world, but there's still graphical issues. And, there's some other issues as well, but this game was just groundbreaking.
Mm-hmm. And that's why people remember it so fondly. The thing with the graphics, for the most part, is that it's very barren. Like, if you go back and watch it now, there's not a whole lot of people on the streets. There's not a whole lot of cars. There's not a whole lot of variety in the buildings. It all looks very samey. Which we didn't notice at the time because we didn't have very many open world games. I mean, you had Grand Theft Auto, probably would have been one of the few other open world games. So, like, I just watched a video the other day about it, and actually I saw it and thought, wait a minute, that can't be right. I remember that looking different, but it doesn't. It's pretty basic.
It is.
But if you've never played a Spider-Man game before, that's not a bad place to start. It has aged a bit. I might go back and play it a little bit, actually.
Now, while that one came out in 2004, there was one that came, well, I guess like the next 5 or 6, 7, 8, whatever, like they're basically every game after that until recently came out every single year, correct? Like,
yeah,
they, like, shotgun them.
There's a couple gaps. Like, we didn't get one in 2006. We didn't get one in 2009.
Okay.
But other than that, from 2004 through 2012, we got a game every single year. And what I think is interesting is a lot of people do have that fondness for Spider-Man 2 because it was such a great game. But I also think most people didn't play any of the games that came afterwards. Because anytime I hear people talk about them, it's like they don't know they exist. And that's a shame because like the next game that came out in 2005 was Ultimate Spider-Man, which was also really, really good. This one basically takes place in the Ultimate version of the comic books, and you could play 2 parts, right? You could play as Spider-Man, and then you could play as Venom as well, as the villain. And so you'd be able to jump around the city as Venom. You would basically feed on people to restore your health. And you could, like, you had the tendrils that you could use to attack. It was very innovative for the Spider-Man game. Even the whole style, like it was having trouble with words today. Cell shaded. It had like the black outlines and everything to look like the comic books. And so I loved this game.
Yeah, I remember this game coming out because I remember I had, I didn't want to play it. I looked at it and I said that game's not for me. And it was based upon the art style and the aesthetics of the game. So Ultimate Spider-Man decided to go very different from like Spider-Man 2. So instead of trying to make it real, they made it in cartoony. I mean, I guess you can
it looks exactly like the comic books if you look at the comic books.
It's incredibly cartoony. You can compare it to maybe one of those like what's that new battle game with all those anime characters coming out?
Oh,
I mean, it's a fighting game.
It's not like that though. That looks
No, but
that
like,
looks more real.
It does, but like the art style is almost like the art. Of
The
those,
art
like,
style
anime.
is closer to like a Beautiful Joe, if you know what that is.
I guess so. You're right. It is.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just it's done differently, and I would say if you're not into the art style like I wasn't, the game turned me off. So like I saw you play it, and I was like, oh, the gameplay's awesome.
Oh yeah.
But the art style turned me off.
Yeah, I can see that. It's a shame though, because it pretty much took everything that worked in Spider-Man 2 and built upon it. Like the web still sticks to buildings, it still has physics. I think the swinging is actually a little bit easier because it's not as physics based. There's a little bit of give in there. This story was actually really good though. Like you had the whole Venom side of it, which up until that point Venom had just appeared in the comic books, or maybe he was just about to appear. So he was brand new, this version of him. So it was really awesome that you could play as him. And then you also got ultimate versions of Rhino. You got Ultimate Green Goblin in there. Several villains. And it was pretty cool. I mean, in terms of gameplay, aside from the things I've mentioned, it wasn't super innovative. It did a lot of the same things as Spider-Man 2. And I think that's a trend that we are going to start to see, because people notice that and stop playing a lot of these games.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, it had a really, really cool design, like, different design elements like you talked about, Caleb, which I think, and the art style itself set it apart from some of the other games. I did want to mention, I forgot about this, going back to Spider-Man 2 just briefly, I bought that game recently it was either a garage sale or I found it like half price books for just a couple of dollars. And I was just interested in how much it would have cost me if I went online and bought it. That's one of the GameCube games that is actually going for a decent amount of money. I think it's like $15 right now on eBay, which for a GameCube game is a lot of money because usually they're like pennies.
Unless it's like Mario Kart.
I was just going to say the only GameCube games that are actually selling like for anything would be any of like the Mario games. So Mario Kart, Mario Party, or Super Smash Brothers.
Yep.
And then maybe like Jedi Outcast or one of the Pokemon like Coliseum games are selling for a little bit more.
I think pretty much the first party Nintendo games sell for a lot, and then just a couple others.
Yeah, exactly. But
Yeah.
Spider-Man 2 is one of those, which I think just speaks to the fact of what a game changer it was.
And also, starting with that first Spider-Man movie game, we see a shift in the developers because they start to be the same people for most of the game. So like Spider-Man the movie, Spider-Man 2 were both done by Treyarch. Ultimate Spider-Man was done by Treyarch and Vicarious Visions, but Vicarious Visions also did that other Spider-Man game that came out in 2000 and the sequel Inter Electro. So we start seeing like these two main companies come to the forefront, and I think that really helps because they can build on what they've already done instead of starting from scratch every single time. But what we got next was almost a step backwards, and that was in 2007. That was Spider-Man 3. Have you played this?
I have not.
So, oh man. Looking at this today, I noticed that it might be because this was the first in the next gen of consoles, because Ultimate Spider-Man was on GameCube, PS2, and Xbox. This was on the Wii, still the PS2, and Xbox 360. And a lot of times when you go to a next generation, the games suffer because the developers haven't figured it out yet. So I kind of wonder if that's part of the reason. But this game, part of the reason this game was not well received is because it was pretty much exactly the same as Spider-Man 2, but worse. Because like they messed up the swinging mechanic. Somehow they made it worse, and nothing looked as good. It was really weird, and like the character designs were weird, and I mean it probably doesn't help it was based off a movie that most people don't like.
Sure. No, that can't. I mean, I think this is seen as one of the worst Spider-Man games in comparison to movie, right? So like the first Spider-Man one in comparison to the movie did decent. Spider-Man 2, obviously, we just talked about. And then Spider-Man 3, I think, fell rather flat. But what I'm more interested in is the game that came after that, Spider-Man Friend or Foe.
Which also came out in 2007, strangely. I am like 99% sure that this was the first game I ever pre-ordered. And let me tell you, What a disappointment.
From the start, Caleb learned never to pre-order a game.
Yeah, so I was not like old enough really to pre-order games up until that point. And I'd saved up some money and I saw it at the GameStop. I was like, oh, there's a new Spider-Man game coming out. I have to get it. And so I saved up the money. I put it down without knowing anything about it. Because this is 2007. I mean, we still haven't gotten to the point where every game is out there where you know everything about it. And so I got it. And this was very, very different from all the other Spider-Man games that come before. Basically, this was done by a different studio. This was done by Next Level Games. And they opted to take a, let's call it family route with the game. So
yeah, if you Google the game Spider-Man Friend or Foe, Spider-Man Friend or Foe,
Friend or Fro, Spider-Man with a fro.
It looks like that Spider-Man game, like based off the movie. Like the graphic wise, it's a huge step back, and the trailer. Just looking at the trailer, it looks like this huge step back.
It's very different. It is based on the movies in terms of the character designs, but it is pretty different. So like basically you'd go through a level, and this was not open world. So you'd go through a level, and that was the first thing that disappointed me because I didn't know that. You go through a level and you get to the end and you fight a villain. Once you beat the villain is like part of your group at that point. It's kind of like Pokemon. You beat it and then you get it, right? And you can use them on future levels, which was actually kind of a cool thing. You could play as them. And you basically work your way through and you beat all the levels. It did have some interesting things. Like I said, the villain thing, I'm pretty sure it was multiplayer, while you were playing the main mode. I could be wrong about that, but it definitely had a multiplayer versus mode, which I don't think any other Spider-Man game had up until that point, and even since. And that was kind of cool because you could get your brother or your friends or whatever together, and someone could be Venom and someone else could be Spider-Man or something, and you could battle it out. But it was very, very cartoony. The story was very childish. I'm pretty sure it was meant to appeal to that type of consumer.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty obvious. And then if you just look at the rankings, Game Zone, Eurogame, IGN, GamePro, Game Informer all gave it like below a 5 out of 10 or at a 5 out of 10. So it didn't do so hot as a game.
Yeah. But the next year in 2008, we got Spider-Man Web of Shadows, which this is a return to the Treyarch developers. Now, Zach, you said you've played this one.
Yeah, so I had this on the Wii, which was interesting because you could either play it as a regular game, like regular controls, or you could use the Wii remotes like you're swinging.
Could you use it with regular controls?
I think so. Yeah, I don't think you had to like flick the remote to swing. Maybe you did.
Because I remember only being able to swing by flicking the remote.
I remember always choosing that, but then I also remember getting incredibly tired of like flicking the remote, being like, this sucks.
Yeah, that was also an issue that Spider-Man 3 had on the Wii, was it used a lot of motion controls.
But so this game is also open world, New York City, with the idea, kind of storyline being that New York City gets closed off when I think it's Venom releases an army of symbiotes to attack New York City. So it's closed off, and then you do different missions. It's what got me. I guess I was expected to be more like Spider-Man 2, so I was let down a little bit with it. And if you just look at reviews, the majority of reviews, are mixed. It's a good game, but people are let down by the graphics that took a step backward. The graphics are not good. They're grainy, and the reviews state that. If you look at it as well, it doesn't have necessarily a super big open world, which is also kind of a letdown with side missions and whatnot. But what made this game unique is that it gave you choices to make. So on the front cover, there's Spider-Man. He's crossing his arms, and on one hand, he has like Venom, and on the other hand, he has Wolverine. I don't know why Wolverine out of all people, but Wolverine.
Wolverine is a guest character in the game.
He is, I know, but like, I'm just still not sure why they decided on Wolverine. I'm just assuming because
probably because the X-Men movies were popular.
Because yeah, exactly right. I mean, now they would choose like Iron Man for sure, hands down. So you can, but it symbolizes the fact that you can either choose like a good side. You always have choices to make like the good choice, Wolverine, or you could follow like basically Venom and make an evil choice. And there's, I think, 4 different kind of cutscenes at the end, depending on what you choose.
Mhm.
But 2 of them are basically similar, where it's either 2 of them are really good or 2 of them are like bad. So something really good happens or something really bad happens, depending on the choices you make in game. So that was a really interesting element. I also enjoyed during the game, you could change out your suit. So you could have, I remember you could wear like the symbiote, but you could also, I think, have like the white Spider-Man symbiote.
There was a lot of alternate costumes.
The steel one.
Yeah. But the cool thing was that in addition to the alternate costumes, there was a mechanic which ties into that lighter dark choose your path thing you're talking about, where you could attach, like I think you pressed over on the D-pad and the symbiote would come out of the ground and you would be in the black suit, and anything you did in that suit would basically count towards your dark side, but you were way stronger in that mode.
But slower.
But slower, yeah. And I think there were actually 2 different ending boss battles depending on which path you took. I think I only ever saw one, but I think I remember reading there was another one.
And which, did you take the symbiote path where you basically turn into Venom, or did you stay good?
I think I stayed good.
I
usually
too.
do.
Yeah, I mean, but that's what disappointed me about this game too. So at the ending, spoiler alert, but this game came out in 2008, so you're 10 years late. But like the ending is a button mash cutscene.
Is it? I don't remember that.
Yes, is the final boss battle. I was so let down because you kind of fight Venom. He's like this he turns into this huge blob, I believe. And there's some backstory. And I remember it's on a skyscraper and you have to do some stuff to fight him. But like the ending, like to defeat him, it's just like A, B, flick the remote a couple times. And like it took a couple times to memorize it, but then I memorized it, was able to defeat it. And then that's it. And then goes to a cutscene.
Yeah.
And I wanted like a super difficult, drawn out story, like boss battle. And I didn't get that. So I was let down by a lot of things in this video game, but I would still say it's a decent one.
Yeah, I think one of the main things that made this one stand out was that, well, there's 2. The first is it's not based on the movies. It's based on an original story.
Yes.
And the story is what drives the game. So like Spider-Man 2, it was a game for the gameplay. This is a game for the story, and it really shines in that area, I think. One thing that we didn't mention it does is the city actually changes as you play. Like, it starts off pretty clean, and as you go through the story mode, like, the whole thing just starts to look destroyed and covered with, like, symbiote ooze and massive symbiote structures. There's a lot of cameos from other heroes. Wolverine is in it. I think Moon Knight is in it. Silver Sable is in it. All kinds of people.
Iron Man, Fantastic Four, Reed Richards, Ant-Man, they all make cameos.
I didn't even remember those. I think this is a hidden gem in the Spider-Man games. I could totally see where you were disappointed with parts of it, but if you know that going in, I definitely think this one's worth a try.
I would agree.
And then we get a shift. This is the point where Activision lost the rights to the games, and this, Treyarch and Vicarious Visions were making the games for Activision, and it switched to the developers Beenox, which made the next 4 games, and we got something completely different in Spider-Man Shattered Dimensions in 2010.
So what is this? I never played it.
Okay, I think you might have seen me play this, but basically the concept of this game, I think basically what they were trying to do was figure out the direction they wanted to go now that they had the license. But the concept, which was really cool, was that basically Mysterio goes and he tries to get this ancient tablet thing, and you accidentally shatter it, and it shatters the dimensions. And so 4 different Spider-Men come together, and you get to play as each one of them in their own universes, all working towards the same central story.
So what, who are the 4 Spider-Man that you get to play as?
Okay,
for those who might not know.
So you get to play as classic Spider-Man. You get to play
Peter
Parker. You get to play as Black Suit Ultimate Spider-Man. So that's in the Ultimate Universe, but it's the Black Suit. You get to play as Spider-Man Noir, which is set in the 1940s. and you get to play as
with the goggles. He has like goggles, right?
And like a trench coat.
Yep.
And you get to play as Spider-Man 2099. And all the gameplay is kind of different. So like Noir focuses more on stealth. 2099 is more of like a beat 'em up button masher game. The regular one is like a lot of webs. Like he makes crazy shapes out of his webs and stuff. And then the Ultimate Spider-Man is kind of more of that tendril combat that we saw in like Ultimate Spider-Man when you played as Venom. But it was really good, actually. This is also another story-driven game. The art style kind of changes as you go between dimensions. Madam Web shows up in it with the same voice actress as the 90s animated series, which just made me fanboy all over the place. And all of the Spider-Man were actually voiced by people who had voiced him in the past, which was also a cool little Easter egg. This game is great. It is level-based, but it is really good. I would highly recommend anybody that hasn't played it, go out and check it out. Cause I love this game. I mean, I'm biased, but
I might have to check it out. You know, I was never really interested into it, but as you're talking about it, that looks super cool.
Yeah, and the graphics were also a big step up too. I will say this was the first one I had on the Xbox because I had upgraded from a Wii at that point. So that could kind of play into my thoughts a little bit, but it's really good. Unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on how you look at it, Beanox released another game the next year called Edge of Time, which was a similar style game.
But not a sequel.
It's not a sequel, no. Well, it might be a sequel, but I don't think it is.
Sure.
I'd have to play it again. It's not a direct sequel anyway. Basically, this one is also another story-driven game. It's similar to the last one where it's level-based. The story in this one is pretty good in concept. I'm not sure if the execution is great, but basically, regular Spider-Man at the very beginning of the game, he is killed by Anti-Venom.
Oh, wow.
And so, fast forward to the future, Spider-Man 2099, he finds out about this and he time travels back to try to revive him. And spoilers, eventually he does, and then he goes back to his own time, and they have to work together to try to stop Anti-Venom. The story is pretty good. The thing that kind of annoyed me is that we just got Spider-Man 2099 in Shattered Dimensions, and his gameplay felt very much the same for the most part. Graphically, it looks really good. At least I remember it looking really great at the time. Worth a playthrough, but probably not repeat playthroughs.
Sounds good. And after that, we dive into another universe, the Amazing Spider-Man universe.
Yes, so this is also Beanox. This is 2012. The movies got rebooted in 2012, and so they needed a video game to go with it, and that's what we got here with the Amazing Spider-Man. This is Beanox's first attempt at an open-world Spider-Man game, because they'd done the two previous, but they weren't open. I have not beaten this one. This is one of the few on the list I have not beaten. It was okay. It had a cool mechanic, kind of like Fallout, where you like hold the right bumper and time kind of freezes, and you can look around and target specific things and zip towards them or attack them or something. Overall, it wasn't great though. I mean, the villains were kind of weird. It did have like Vermin in it, which is cool because he's not usually featured in Spider-Man games, and so that's a different type of villain. But the swinging was weird. I don't think the web's attached to buildings anymore, which they didn't in the previous ones either, the previous Beanox ones. So this is kind of a step down. I don't know if you've looked into anything about this, Zach.
No, I'm looking up screenshots right now. I mean, it looks interesting, but the graphics look better. I'll give it that. Other than that, you know, it kind of looks like just like a reskinned Spider-Man 2.
It kind of is, but it doesn't feel as good.
Sure.
And I think that's kind of part of the problem. It was received okay.
Did it follow the storyline of the movie?
I don't remember it following the storyline, but I also didn't beat it. So I know like at one point the Lizard was releasing lizards across the city, so that kind of ties in to the movie.
Sure.
But it wasn't the same sort of thing at that point. So you could give that one a pass. And then they did another one 2 years later, Amazing Spider-Man 2. I haven't played it, mostly because I just haven't bought it, but that one is not known to be good, like, at all.
Yeah. How did the second one or the first one?
The second one.
Okay. And
Yeah.
this is the only one you haven't played.
Yeah, the only one, technically I haven't played Enter Electro, from 2001, but aside from that, it's the only one of, like, the 3D Spider-Man games I haven't played. It apparently, the swinging might be a little bit better, but it's also just overall still not great. They didn't improve as much as they needed to. It probably suffered because it was on a movie timeline. Usually games do, you have to be out by the time the movie's out, and they just don't have enough time to finish the game. And that's what we got.
And just like the Spider-Man 3 game, Amazing Spider-Man 2 wasn't super well received. Even though I thought it was a fine movie. And so I'm assuming that the video game didn't do as well.
Yeah, it didn't.
Because of that, So they had that going on. But then there was silence throughout the land for 4 years.
Yeah, and like nothing. Like no handheld games, no arcade games. The only thing Spider-Man would show up in was maybe like some other games that had him in it. Like, this is about the time Marvel started doing a whole lot of mobile games.
Sure,
Which,
yeah. Why? I know,
just
why?
Don't.
Please don't.
Yeah, and it was silence until 2 years after that, they announced they were going to do a new Spider-Man game, that Insomniac was going to be making it, but it didn't actually end up coming out until this year. Which is kind of funny, because that's one of the reasons I bought my PS4.
Now, this is the first Spider-Man game by Insomniac. So they switched out of, you said it was Beanox.
Yeah, Beanox was the people that had the license, and now it's Insomniac, who did things like Ratchet and Clank. They did Sunset Overdrive. Really well-regarded games for the most part. Fun games. And this is part of a shift that Marvel actually did, where they hired a new guy over their video games division. And instead of like giving a company a license and just letting them run with it, they're being more selective now. Partially because we had Arkham Knight, right? Arkham Asylum, Arkham City, the Batman games that were really good. They know that games can be good, but you have to be a little bit more selective with your developers. So they actually went to Insomniac and said, hey, we like what you do. What character would you like to make a game out of? And they got to pick. And they picked Spider-Man. And that's good.
It's great. I mean, what's interesting about this too is the developer, like you just said, is Insomniac. But if you look at like the publishers that have been on the other games, a lot of times it's Activision, had it for a long time, and you mentioned that. This is the first Spider-Man game that's I don't know if you would call it self-published, but it's published by Sony themselves. So it's not published like by Activision, like Sony Entertainment.
Mm-hmm. It's a first-party game.
Yeah, is publishing it, which I think is very interesting. And this is their kind of first attempt. Yeah,
and this marks a big shift. I mean, they're also working on a Avengers game. Square Enix is working on one. I think it's their Crystal something developer group is working on it. And I think we're going to start to get a lot more high-quality Marvel games. This one is their first big push, and I think it's good at Spider-Man. I am personally happy at Spider-Man because I'm a big fan, and it looks really, really good.
Have you been able to watch some gameplay?
Yeah, I've stopped looking at a bunch of things recently because I'm at the point where I don't want to be spoiled on everything, but I have seen gameplay. It looks very slick and smooth. I have seen some boss fights. I've seen some different events. I will say my one reservation is some of the movements look a little slow, but based on what everyone has said when they've played it, it doesn't feel that way when you actually play it. They feel very fluid and natural.
I also know there are a variation of moves and ways you can use your webs, which I think is very kind of ingenious in crafting Spider-Man and how to use him. I do know a huge reveal, spoiler alert, Uncle Ben dies.
Zach, you scared me.
Just kidding.
Don't do that to me.
Got him.
Yeah, it's interesting to see where this goes. I think there's going to be some cameos by other heroes in it. It's already been confirmed that the Sanctum Sanctorum is in it, if not Doctor Strange, and the Avengers Tower is in it, if not the Avengers. Miles Morales is in it, who is the Ultimate Spider-Man at this point. You can play as Peter at some point, apparently. You can play as MJ at some point, apparently.
Wait, like you can like just walk around?
I don't know what the specifics are, but like in the Arkham games, there were parts where you would play as Bruce. At least there was one part at the beginning.
Wait. So you're telling me that if I get a PS4, I can play as Peter Parker, walk out of a coffee shop, start strutting through New York City with my emo black hair and hip thrust to some music.
Yeah. You could probably do that.
Nice. Spider-Man 3 all over again. I'm getting my PS4.
That's what did it. Yeah, but this game comes out next week. Comes out September 7th. I am pumped. I have been waiting for 2 years for this game. Hopefully it lives up to the hype. Yeah. You got anything else to say?
I don't. You'll have to keep us updated, Caleb, and let us know how it goes. If it does live up to the hype, and you'll have to tell us if it sadly does not. But we will definitely stay tuned.
All right, so I thought that you've only played 2 or 3 of these. So between the ones you've played and you like, and the ones you see that you might be interested in playing, what would you recommend people to play?
Spider-Man 2. I mean, I'm very nostalgic of that. Keep that in mind. But like I said, buy it on eBay if you have a GameCube for like $15 or a PlayStation, I think, 2. Just buy it. Yeah, $10, $15. Play the game. It was one of the first open world Spider-Man games, and it's a simple, fun game. Have it yourself.
And I would recommend Spider-Man 2. That's the movie version, by the way, not the Intro Electro one.
Yes.
Ultimate Spider-Man, Shattered Dimensions, and Web of Shadows would be my 4 picks to play. And of course the new one that's coming out. All right. Well, Zach, that wraps that up. And it's time for our best segment, What You Been Up To? Zach,
well,
what you been
I
up to?
mentioned...
I didn't ask you yet. I was
no.
saying the name of it. Come on,
worst.
Zach. We need an intro music. That's the problem. What you been up to this past week?
No.
What you been up to?
So, as I mentioned in the previous week, is that I watched several movies on my plane rides over and back from Europe. One of those I talked about last week as Pacific Rim Uprising. I also watched Ready Player One.
Oh, okay.
The Steven Spielberg... is that right? Steven Spielberg?
Yep. The masterpiece?
Yes, the masterpiece, Ready Player One, adapted from a book, the same name and basically same storyline, I'm assuming. I haven't read the book yet. Blaine did. He's been on here. He said it was a good book. Yep. So I watched that. It was decent. They had a car chase in the beginning that was really cool.
Mm-hmm.
And after that, it was decent. There were a lot of really cringy moments. I have to say that. Like I was cringing in my airplane seat. Like, I should shut this off because if somebody sees this movie next to me, they will like die of cringe.
What?
Just because it's just not because there was like anything bad, but just because it was like a classic, like video game. Like they made the jokes. Oh, this is what if the girl's a 80-year-old man who weighs 500 pounds, and then inevitably, one of the guys is actually a girl, and like you see that coming from a mile away, and then like some of the comments they make and like how they interact is just super cringeworthy, and you're just like, why am I watching this? But it was a decent movie. I mean, I would say if you have like a free Friday night, this is a movie that I would Netflix. I wouldn't Redbox it.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't go out in the theaters and see it. I'm glad I saw it free. But I would go watch it on Netflix if you have a free hour and a half. But don't pursue it if there's better movies out there. And there's better movies out there. That's my opinion, though. So that's what I thought about it.
I saw the movie in theaters, actually. I was curious because there was a lot of hate surrounding it, which was strange because there was a lot of hype for the book when it first came out, and then people seemed to turn on it. I have not read the book either. I actually really enjoyed the movie. I didn't think it was cringy. I didn't really have any issues with it. I know some people were concerned it was just going to be a list of references. Part of that's in there, but I think it works better in visual format than a book, from what I know, from what I've heard from people. I think the ending scenes are really awesome. I don't want to spoil what it is if you do see the movie. There's a lot of characters you can spot if you're a fan of anything, it's probably in this movie somewhere. They worked for like 2 years to get the rights for all the characters.
But they couldn't get the rights to Star Wars.
No, they did actually. That was false information that went out. Because
they don't have like any Star Wars character that I saw.
It's in the background of one of the scenes because one of the guys working on the movie came out and talked about it because someone said they didn't get the rights for Star Wars, and he was like, "No, that's not actually correct. We did get the rights, and it
was just too late, so they just."
I think like R2 is in the background of one of the scenes.
But there's no like prominent character. Here's my assumption. They put R2 way in the back, and they're like, all right, if we don't get the rights, we'll remove him. We'll put him in this place that's easily like removable. And last minute, they got the rights, so they left him in, but it wasn't enough, because like in the trailers, you see that they have Tracer from Overwatch, right? Which is like, that's, that video game just became popular not too long ago. So that was like obviously one that they could put front and center. And you would think they'd put somebody like Luke Skywalker, Darth Vader front and center if that were the case.
Yeah, I mean, I see your point. I can't argue with it. You're right, but I don't know if I would have wanted like Darth Vader front and center. I don't know. That might have been weird.
Well, and most of the characters, they don't. I mean, other than like, the only one I can think of is Master Chief. They show like 3 times. And it's just like right in your face. And I'm like, whoa. But other than that, there's nothing like right in front of your face for the majority. They're more glimpses.
Yeah. They're for the most part, single shots. There are a few that they specifically spotlight. I don't want to ruin those in case you see the movie, because some of them are pretty fun. But yeah, I think you're right. If you've got a free afternoon, check it out. But if there's something else you want to watch that. But I do think it's worth a watch.
So Caleb, what you been up to?
Well, I was trying to think of what I've been up to, and I couldn't think of much.
Nice.
I was out of town
getting ready for Spider-Man.
Yeah, right. I was out of town over the weekend playing video games at a cabin, like we nerds do. But when I got back, I was super exhausted and didn't want to do anything. So I marathoned what I had left of My Hero Academia. So I am all caught up. I think it's like episode 56. I've talked about this briefly on the show before. It's an anime. I think I did mention in our anime episode. I think it was one of my honorable mentions. It's really good. It's really good.
Now, aren't they doing a like new season of that show as well? That they just announced it?
It's currently running.
Oh, okay.
There's a movie coming out next month. Well, by the time this comes out, it'll be this month in September. There's a movie coming out in September.
Okay,
it's the
that's
first
what I
movie.
Saw. Sure.
Yeah. I would actually highly recommend this series. It is so incredibly good about giving you all the information you need, not overloading you, being action-packed, having all the emotion, having the beats that it needs to have. And it ends almost every single episode in a cliffhanger, but not an annoying cliffhanger that they manufactured. Like, it feels very natural, and you want to go to the next one. That's why it's so easily bingeable. The voice acting is spot on. I think the premise is really great, which is, the premise is that basically there are superheroes in the world now. There are pro superheroes, and they are paid to protect the world. But to be a pro hero, you have to go through hero school, and basically get your license and be licensed by the government to work. But if you're not licensed and you do it, you're being illegal. And it's about a main character who, pretty much everybody in the show is born with a power. The main character is not born with a power. He is gifted a power, which you're not supposed to be able to do. And it's kind of his story as he goes through school, and a mentor kind of picks him to become the next big hero.
Yeah, that actually really sounds super interesting. I'll have to check that out.
It's really good. I think, Zach, actually, you would like it a lot. I know that you can watch it on the Funimation streaming service. You do have to pay for that, but I think it's only like $6 a month. It's very reasonable. And it's in English. So, check it out.
Pleb.
That's right.
I'll have to go watch it. Well, Caleb, I think that wraps up our discussion on Spider-Man and what we have been up to. Just in time to see. Do you see him? He's swinging through my house right now. His name?
Taylor Poole.
That's right. Go check out Taylor Poole. Music, you know the gig, for some web swinging, butt kicking action.
TaylorPooleMusic.com. Also, check out our friends over at CNC Power Hour on Twitch, where they stream Magic the Gathering.
Taylor Poole swinging over to them right now, and I'm pretty sure he's kicking their butts. He's got them both webbed up right now. That doesn't look too good.
CNC Power Hour over on Twitch. Magic the Gathering and video games. That's right. Video games.
And finally, make sure you check out our website. It's new, it's updated, it's fresh. It's
like Zach's underwear.
Meming fresh spicy memes.
What?
Maybe, but you won't know until you check it out.
I feel like that's a trap.
Oh,
it's a trap!
There's no traps on there.
Okay. That's good. Thanks for listening to 'Cause We're Nerds. Stay up to date with all the nerdy news and podcast drops by following us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. You can also leave us comments and feedback at cuzwerenerds@gmail.com. That's CUZWERENERDS@gmail.com. And as always, if you enjoy this podcast, we would love it if you could leave us a 5-star review on iTunes. We'll see you next week, and as always, stay nerdy.
Caleb, stop talking. This has now become a Spider-Man thread.
Wow.
That's pretty much it.
Yeah, scraping the barrel today, guys.
I know.